it's hard to audition for something that has no lines. So they were like, can you improvise? And I just came up with the most offensive, the most upsetting disability jokes that I knew wouldn't be used and would never be public, but like matched the tone of Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Like I knew what the assignment was, right? And I got the part.
Hello, and welcome to Art Restart, where we learn from artists who, wherever they work, whatever they make, are shaking up the status quo in their fields and in their communities. I'm Piercarlo Talenti, the producer and editor of this podcast, which is brought to you by the Thomas S. Keenan Institute for the Arts at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. In this episode, we'll be spending time with actor and playwright Ryan J. Haddad. I spoke with Ryan on his precious Monday day off of rehearsal, so appreciate that, just days before the first public performance of his latest solo show, Hold Me in the Water, currently at Playwrights Horizons in New York City through May 4th, 2025. His two previous solo ventures, Hi, Are You Single? And Dark Disabled Stories, earned him raves and a loyal fan base, with Dark Disabled Stories winning an Obie Award for Best New American Play after its extended sold-out run at the Public Theatre. In his plays, Ryan, with humor and candor, explores the messy, joyful, and often awkward intersections of disability, desire, and self-advocacy. Speaking of advocacy, Ryan, who uses a walker in his daily life and on stage, also makes sure that each production of his work includes a broad range of accessibility features tailor-made for each play. He also has a solid television resume, including featured roles in Netflix's The Politician and Hulu's A Murder at the End of the World. I started off our conversation by asking him if he could remember the first time he performed solo on stage, which is daunting for any performer, but I was curious, as an actor with a disability, did he feel particularly vulnerable or scrutinized, especially if most of his audience was able-bodied?
You know, the first time I did it with an acting class, I was 7 and I was playing Rumpelstiltskin. But the first time I did it, like in my, heart and soul, I was 5 years old and my family was putting on Snow White in the living room, and I was Prince Charming. So there were all these years of doing either my family plays, which were sort of an 8-year endeavor that we did together until I was 13, or doing these youth theater, community theater, school plays, like that sort of run-of-the-mill stuff. I knew that there were roles that I wasn't getting because of the disability, or that I was being cast in the roles I was getting because the disability was like a better fit for those parts. But I never really felt like scrutinized by the audience. I just was like up there doing Alice in Wonderland or Babes in Toyland or The Wizard of Oz, that kind of stuff. Or our final Haddad theater production, which was Andy instead of Annie, when I played Andy at the age of 13. So I didn't endeavor to make solo work until I was a sophomore in college at Ohio Wesleyan, and my brilliant professor and mentor, Dr. Ed Kahn, brought in his friend, Tim Miller, who is a internationally renowned solo performer and performance artist, and has been doing this for 40 plus years,
and
but
a queer icon too, right?
Absolutely a queer icon, but also a wonderful teacher, and has for many years been going around the country to do all of these wonderful residencies in, any university, any college, university, doctorate programs, MFA programs, non-educational. Like he does not discriminate who he believes is sort of worthy of sharing their personal stories. You know what I mean? It's not like there's a certain level of performer, or it has to, you have to be really good. His philosophy is anybody has a story that's worthy of being told.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about the permission to then tell that story. So I did my first workshop with him at 21 as a sophomore in college, and then did 3 more of those workshops by the time I graduated. And after the second one, which was the summer of 2013, he told me, come to New York. I'm doing a residency commemorating the NEA 4. I'm doing a residency at the New Museum. And for mine, I want to do a performance workshop where other people will perform. It is not my performance. It is other people. And I want you to be one of the people.
Wow.
And that was the second time that I worked as under him, like as a student. And after that, he said, okay, you have to have a full show by the time you graduate college. I was about to start my junior year, and I was like, that's so bizarre. A, why would you say that? B, who would listen? Who would watch an hour of me being me? And guess what? A lot of people have. I've been doing, since I first performed Hire You Single 10 years ago. It's actually 10 years. It started in this directing studio at my liberal arts college at Ohio Wesleyan. Those first 2 nights were the first time that I ever commanded a whole room by myself. And they were full houses, but they were full houses of people who mostly knew me.
Right.
They were primarily non-disabled people because I was at my college where there weren't a lot of other, there weren't other disabled people, or at least, visibly mobility disabled people like myself. But it was a very warm room. Everybody was sort of really rooting for me in a way that was a really beautiful experience. And what I remember most is my parents in the 3rd row. And I knew where their seats were because they had assigned seats because I was going to call on them.
Oh my God, poor parents of theater people.
And
they go through it.
And they knew that it was a very sort of sexy and sort of sex-forward show of their 23-year-old son who they didn't know. I don't know if they knew up to that point had even had sex, right? Or had any kind of sexual experience, right? And so I remember sitting with him at KFC down the block from the theater, and I don't know why we were eating KFC before the show. What a horrible thing to eat, before you're about to go on stage for an hour alone. But sort of warning them. And then they walk in, and my professor said, "How are you feeling?" And they said, "We're nervous." And I was looking at them the whole time. Every time that the audience would laugh, they would be wiping away tears. Not because they were, because the jokes are bad. They were laughing because they knew the audience was with me and that I had that ability to command the room and that maybe I could keep doing this. And they are 2 of my biggest cheerleaders. And they ultimately, I've been performing Hire You Single for the entirety of those 10 years. The last time I did it was just now, and just recently in January in Vermont. And I think my parents have seen it upwards of 15 times in those 10 years or more. And sometimes it would come, days in a row if I was doing multiple performance run. So that's what I remember the most about the first time. But it is what you said. It was a room full of mostly non-disabled people
When did you know for sure you were going to pursue acting as a profession?
It's a complicated question. I wanted to pursue acting as a career from the time I was 3 years old, crawling around the living room, doing Disney princess movies, right? I wanted to star on Broadway and be in the middle of a kick line and be a musical theater showman from before I even knew what Broadway or New York was. That was the childhood dream. The childhood dream was not autobiographical solo performance. My God, who is 5 years old and dreams of that?
I'm sure there's one out there.
Maybe. That's the thing. Until Tim showed up at Ohio Wesleyan, I didn't even know that it was a possible path. That one could make a career of it, that people would want to keep coming, that could create a body of work. Any of these things, I had no idea. So actually, I think the truth is that until Tim arrived, I had convinced myself through years of being hardened in school or community theater or family, not my family theater, because the family theater was where I could make myself the star and often did. Not always, but often. But these places of sort of being typecast as a teenager based on my walker and knowing that I wasn't ever going to be the lead, or I wasn't getting the lead, or whether it was that I wasn't good enough, thank you very much, or that I didn't fit the mold of the kinds of roles that I wanted to play within the bounds of either musical theater or the bounds of the plays that people do for teenagers to perform, was like, oh, this isn't for me. I'm not going to make it as a performer, so I better be a director or a writer. And then it was Tim arriving and being like, you should be a writer, and you are a performer. You are a natural born performer. And just because you got tired of people waiting around to put you in roles that already exist doesn't mean that there aren't roles for you, and that the role of Ryan, the character of Ryan, can be a role that you play and play very well. And so I think from sophomore year forward, I was sort of warming back up to the idea of maybe I can pursue performance as well, and acting, as well as writing and creating and generating my own work.
Well, the first time I got to see you perform was in A Murder at the End of the World, because I'm
so you're a newbie. You're a
Brit Marling fan. So yeah, I'm a total newbie. So that was exciting to see you in a big, high budget TV show. In the 10 years since you've been to New York,
yeah,
what have been the most positive surprises? What work has yet to be done? Like, how have you managed to make this career for yourself?
Well, I think look, it starts with advocates within your own community. It really does. And I'm talking about the disabled community. There was an organization that no longer exists called Inclusion in the Arts. And two people who worked there were brilliant performers in their own right, but also incredible disability advocates, Christine Bruno and David Harrell. I met Christine the same summer that I came here to do the workshop with Tim. So she knew of me and was also like, whenever like a new young person is coming to New York who has disability, they like look to the disabled people that they know and who live there to be like, how does one live here? What is the way in which you could do that safely, accessibly, affordably? And sometimes there are not good answers to those questions.
Right, because the infrastructure of New York is not necessarily built for people with disabilities.
Not at all. Not at all. But Christine was as helpful as an adult looking at a young kid with starry-eyed who wanted to come could be, and just told the truth, told it like it was, which is what you need to do, because this is not an easy city. I adore her and love her, and we're dear friends to this day. So Christine came to the very first performance of Hire You Single in New York, which was a one-night performance in August of 2015. Christine sees the first performance and is like, wow, he's great, right? So I immediately enter her roster. Inclusion in the Arts was the kind of organization where when they needed a disabled performer of any kind, they would turn to Inclusion in the Arts, and casting directors, producers would be provided with a list from which to build their audition pool. And so my first moment on television was a principal role, a principal contract, but it wasn't, I had no lines, and it was, can you imagine? It was on Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, and the segment that Jeff Goldblum was hosting on a fake Dr. Phil show was called The Superstars of Tragedy. Thank you. So I auditioned for that, and it's hard to audition for something that has no lines. So they were like, can you improvise? And I just came up with the most offensive, the most upsetting disability jokes that I knew wouldn't be used and would never be public, but like matched the tone of Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Like I knew what the assignment was, right? And I got the part. And that's how I can say like 9.5, almost 10 years working professionally, because that was my first like paying thing was TV. The first 3 to 4 months I moved here.
That's amazing.
I didn't have an agent for playwriting for the first 3 years I was here. And then I didn't have anyone representing me for acting really for 4 years. And then we get to the end of year 4, beginning of year 5, guess what? There's a pandemic, right?
Right.
It's you know, a lot of time is spent with like, who do you know, who knows you, who can vouch for you? It doesn't mean that you don't have to show up in the audition room and do your very best. And sometimes you'll be right for it and sometimes you won't. But if you can't even get in the audition room to begin with, then there is no opportunity to be had. You know what I'm saying?
Once you do land a gig, whether in the theater or TV, to what extent are you comfortable? Because I doubt most writers' rooms have a person with a disability writing your character. To what extent are you comfortable sharing things about your character that may be inauthentic?
It just depends on the environment. It really depends on the environment and who is willing and who is not. You can take that temperature pretty easily. Who is warm and welcoming and who wants your feedback, or who will be receptive if there's a piece of feedback that they may not necessarily have wanted, but that you have to give. You know what I mean?
Because like, for instance, in Murder at the End of the World, I noticed that their vision of the mobility of the character is different from your actual mobility.
Yes. Well, that was also an instance of it was based on somebody that they knew, you know, a friend of theirs. And I want to honor that as well, meaning that like, if that's where you're coming from as a writer, I'm not going to say like, well, I want it to be more like me, you know? And I think it was justified because the character I was playing was this sort of tech guru.
And he had an ultra modern motorized.
Yeah. And of course he would just want to like ride around. Like he would want to be in the most technologically advanced device possible, which my walker, the same model of which I've been using since 1995, is not that. You know? So, you know, there's give and take there. Like I have no problem inhabiting other mobility devices. I think for me, what it comes down to is, can I, yes, believably play this character who uses this device, but also is this device something that Ryan, the human being, is comfortable enough in to be able to do good acting. You know what I mean?
So there's two things, because I was asking you about the character, but now we're talking about you, Ryan, the performer. To what extent in any medium are creative teams open to hearing what your actual needs are?
Oh, I mean, they have to be. I mean, whether they're open or not, you have to give it to them. That's hard. Like, it's harder to be like, I think the character should do this. I think you should rewrite the script to say this, you know? And there are moments and there are people for which that is warmly welcomed. And then there are others who are like, that is overstepping and that will not be happening. And you just...
Which you understand as a writer anyway, right?
I do. I mean, yes, I do. And I say the same thing. My next play, which is, you know, there is no production commitment to it at all. And I don't know when or where it will be, but it's a big family play where my whole family is on stage. And we've developed that play for 7 years. And I have the same sort of hard boundaries to actors in the room. So before, when you were like, you were so open to the creativity of your ending or the feedback on your ending, I am also really open when it's other actors playing characters who are real people in my life, but also they're real people in my life. So you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I am the authority on Bob and Judy Haddad, my parents. I am the authority on fabulous gay Uncle Charlie and brilliantly wonderful lesbian Aunt Janet. And so I will tell you that this is the way it will be done, kind of thing. So I obviously have sympathy toward that. Not even just sympathy. I obviously have respect for somebody else's creative vision of a character. But if something is egregious, I will raise my hand and say, this is egregious. Now, when it comes to Ryan's access needs, like, I'm sorry, but that is what needs to happen in order to do the work. And that is certainly hard when you're just starting out, to assert yourself and advocate for yourself. But it must be done, because how are you going to do your best work possible if you cannot access the space, if you cannot access the environment or be given the tools in order to be able to show
Is that
up?
something you teach to? Have you taught? I imagine you've taught other performers with disabilities.
I have taught them when they've appeared in the classes where
In
I'm
the classes, but
autobiographical
not specifically.
performance,
Do
where
you?
yeah, but not a whole.
Right.
I've done a couple of
Do you
talks.
also teach them about this advocating for yourself, about raising your voice? Because I feel like you have it in your character.
I do that more when I'm doing kind of like someone brings me in as a guest and I'm just giving them a talk about the industry,
Right.
right? And I don't do it unless somebody raises their hand and self-identifies as disabled. And then I sort of zero in on that person and really hammer it home, because it has to happen. It just has to happen. And, you know, I'm at a position in my career where I'm not afraid. I know the value that I bring, whether it's my own work and writing or somebody's casting me in a show. I will say what I need to say. I also have a great team around me now. I have a manager, I have an agent for playwriting, and they're not afraid either. And so they'll just like, no, it's this or he's not showing up. It's this or, you know, sometimes there's give and take. Sometimes things are given and sometimes they aren't. But at that point, then I have to decide, is this worth doing? Can I do this in these circumstances and conditions? And if I can, then I will. And if I can't or simply don't want to, then I won't. Like, access accommodations are really important.
Well, actually, that brings me to my next question, which is for instance, Playwrights Horizons has put in a lot of protocols to make your performance, your play, as accessible to a wide range of experiences as possible. To what extent are you involved in that decision making?
As much as humanly possible. You know,
so that's part of it, because I was thinking just making a new play takes up enough mental and creative space as possible.
But we've been planning the production offer came in March of 2024, and we've been really deeply talking about access and what access offerings we could make available as early as June of 2024. It was
it is part of your creative process. It's really not an afterthought.
It was a big part of the pre-production process.
Okay.
And the thing is, like, what was being offered in Dark Disabled Stories was like everything all the time, everything everywhere all at once. That's not what we're doing here. So we're doing a variation. We're doing the same sort of kinds of offerings, but at different quantities or at different frequencies. And in my next play, the big family play, which is about my gay uncle, it's called Good Time Charlie. I don't know. Like, I don't know what kind of access is going to work inside of a play with 7 people on stage doing dialogue as opposed to doing monologues, which is Dark Disabled and Obie in the Water. Like, so what I'm not going to do is promise exactly the same kind of access all the time. But what I do think is exciting and what we're trying to offer is, this is one way you can do it. This is another way you can do it. And there are 10 other ways you can do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But what we're doing is demonstrating the kinds of access that are possible. And once we get the offer for that production, we will then come back to the table and say, what access works for this play? What doesn't? How can we still offer as much access as possible while honoring the writing and honoring the form of the play itself? What I hope to also be demonstrating, even within my own body of work, is that it's not one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, this is the way it has to be done. But I do really value options, and the options that the disabled community and the deaf and disabled community will have to be able to come in and choose from a number of performances as opposed to, this is your one chance to experience Hold Me in the Water. That feels wrong to me, and I hope to never do that in my own work. And yet it makes me think, because you said who's comfortable when like you're hired to do another job. Like, that's complicated too when I'm an actor. Because of course I want to continue the advocacy, continue the broadening access opportunities. But also sometimes it's not my play, right?
Right.
And I'm just there to, do my job and, go home. And so it's hard when you're just a member of an equity acting company to be like, let me sit down with your institution and tell them all the things they're doing wrong and how they could do better. I haven't quite found the way in to do that, and I hope to be better at it. But also sometimes when I'm just showing up and being the actor, adding the other stuff is like more of a job than is necessary and not the job I've been hired to do.
Right.
But it is on my mind, when I'm in a play that I am not a creative authority on, what are the ways that my community, and then sometimes in some ways my fans, can still show up and access the piece.
Another reminder that Hold Me in the Water is running at Playwright's Horizons through May 4th, 2025. And who knows, it may have been extended after publication of this episode, so if you can't see it before May 4th, go to playwrightshorizons.org and hope for an extension. You can learn more about Ryan and read this interview at uncsa.edu/artrestart. And please share this episode with anyone you think would enjoy it. That would be awesome. Our theme music is by Shanghai Restoration Project. I'm Piercarlo Talenti, and on behalf of the Thomas S. Keenan Institute for the Arts at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, thank you for listening.